call the meeting to order. Tammy and George will be absent this evening. I'm not going to mention that every time. Item 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda of February the 21st, 2019.
Mayor, I do have a couple of questions about item 7.1. We can either talk about it now or we can talk about it when that item comes up on the agenda. It doesn't make any difference to me. If we're going to make this last until 6:30, is that going to be any problem?
Make it last till when?
6:30?
The meeting or the study session?
Yes.
Well, the mayor cuts us off at 6:15.
Okay.
Is that,
But I'm saying is, do we have more time to talk about it now than we will later?
we can talk about it now, and we can certainly talk about it. You'll have an opportunity to talk about it in the regular meeting if you like, or ask your questions. I can explain to you what it is, or I'll try to answer your question right now if you'd like.
Okay. Well, why don't we do it now?
Okay.
7.1 is, of course, pertaining to acquiring the property there on the corner of Cleveland and Garrett. Where are we going to get the money for this? Do we just...
We're going to appropriate the money from EMA reserves. Aaron, would you answer that?
Absolutely. We do have cash reserves in EMA. We ended last year with a surplus and unrestricted funds in EMA, and they're available to transfer over to
There's plenty to cover this.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any lease issues involved there where people that are currently residing on that property have a lease that we're going to get stuck with?
With the properties that are contemplated with this purchase contract, I believe that the current owner does have some tenants in there, but part of the provision of the contract is to have those tenants out by or before close as a condition to close.
So you don't think that anybody's got a lease that's going to not allow him to do that?
His tenants are month to month,
Okay.
so I don't anticipate any issues with that.
I think it's been month to month from...
Well,
That's what I've heard.
I'd heard that, but I didn't know it for a fact.
That's a good question.
Sometimes when you get to, looking into these things, you find out not exactly what you thought it was. And do we actually have someone lined up to start construction there this year?
We do have an executive session. We'd like to talk about some of those, and we have put that on the agenda. So
I understand that, but what my concern is, do we want to go ahead and buy it now if we're not going to use it now?
I think we want to buy it now because to do anything in that, the city's been working for about 5 years at this location.
I remember that.
Our difficulty is that we don't own all the properties. And to be able to do anything there, our options really are to continue to try to own all the properties, find somebody to buy the properties we have that would develop it, or do some sort of land swap. Haven't been able to work out the two latter ones, but I think this is a pretty good agreement to get 25 properties to go with the 22 that we have. That would give us 47. There is one property that would still be left to be acquired by somebody at some point. But having the contiguous properties together along Garrett and Cleveland would support development soon. And we'll talk about some options in executive session.
And Ron, if we don't elect to go with the option that is on the executive session agenda, we'll finally be holding all the cards.
Well, I understand that, but we've been holding the cards that we've got a long time, and I'm just saying is, if it is going to sit there vacant for another 2 or 3 years, why not leave our money where it is?
Because at that point, we have the whole hand. I mean,
I know that.
To extend-
yeah.
that
I know what
seems
you're talking about,
worthwhile.
But do we need to hold hand if we're not, if nobody's ready to build anything there?
I think our difficulty has been to get people to do something there. We have to have contiguous pieces of property that can be developed.
You're satisfied, though, that if we own this property, that something will happen there very soon?
I am, and I think it's a fantastic deal, quite frankly. If you look at it, it is $2.1 million, but that's less than $85,000 of property. And I think you remember what we paid for the last property that we bought.
You don't even want to talk about that.
Not really, because it's a very high number. There's very few properties that we acquired in there that we own in the 22 that we paid 85,000 or less. Most of those properties,
I don't remember any.
there was 5 or 6, I think, but
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Okay, thank you.
you bet.
Anything else? The invocation this evening?
Are we doing?
Oh, we're in study section. I'm in the wrong pew.
Feels like we're in regular session.
I'm in the wrong pew. Item 3, discuss proposed public safety funding ordinance revision.
Yes, I'll talk about that, Mayor and Commissioners. And Julia, if you could pull up the ordinance now, we'll just go ahead and look at that. What this is we're looking at a draft revision of the ordinance for consideration at some future meeting. In talking with the chiefs and the chief financial officer, the way that we fund according to the current ordinance simply doesn't compute correctly. So this is a way to capture more accurately what we're doing and provide more of a consistent amount to both of the public safety departments, and the chiefs can talk about it as they want. But let's go ahead and scroll through it. And just look at the changes pretty quickly. I'm sure you may have looked at them already. One of them is simply related to governmental accounting stuff. We've called these in the ordinance an enterprise fund. Technically, they're not an enterprise fund per accounting doctrine, so a GAAP. So they're called governmental funds, so that's simple. Really, all the changes in here are pretty straightforward. You can read it. It talks about out of the safety tax, the public safety tax was approved in 2001 of a 1/4 cent split between both departments. 30% is required to be used for capital purposes, or at least over time for capital purposes. So what we think more accurately captures a better funding method for the public safety departments, which are a priority of the city and the city, is to fund the operational costs of the departments and then add the 30% in. That's how the budget was computed this year. Chiefs, feel free. You helped draft this, so please state what you think.
I just wanted to say, I think this ensures that 30% of our public safety sales tax is going to be used for capital in the future, which helps us plan and build for the future and pay for our needs. Without that protection, honestly, in the past, there were some times where most of that public safety sales tax was going for operations. This ensures that we're building a fund to buy the high-dollar equipment that both of us need.
Satisfied with it?
Yes,
Changes? Brian?
satisfied.
So Carol, is this changing, I mean, it seems like we're changing language to better comply with what the public tax that was approved, is that right? Or, I mean, is this,
Well, Chief?
Well, the old ordinance doesn't work because it's based on the 17 and 20% at a revenue stream. That revenue stream has changed, and the 17 and 20% now would not fund either department full. And this does change it to fully funded plus 30%, which can be basically saved in the governmental fund, which I like. I did like the 17 and 20%, but that revenue stream apparently is not as big as it used to be with changes that were made by the commission. So this is okay. I think it'll work. I'm comfortable with it. I want to see how it goes. I'd like to hear input from the commission, what you all think. I want to make sure, and we both do, that we don't run into any shortages for public safety. Obviously, that's our priorities. I think it's a very important priority for the city.
Brian, how often is that transfer made? Look to me like the transfer of those sales tax monies are
It's monthly.
monthly. Is
Transfers from the city and from the PSI, the public safety tax, monthly.
good because on an annual basis, that's not a whole lot of money to operate on.
No, but it helps.
Do what?
It certainly helps.
Yes. Oh,
The part that was in the measure, the election ballot was the 30% annually.
Okay.
And that is preserved.
What's the estimate of that?
The estimate on the public safety sales tax side, usually about 1.3 to 1.4 million per year. And so 30% of that by ordinance has to be spent on capital projects. But much like our building over there, we saved some and then spent a lot. So we're probably running about 60% over the lifespan of the PSI. We're up around 70 some odd percent. So most of that money is gone for capital as per the ordinance.
That money's meshed with the fire department, too.
Right.
Same, which is good. Any other questions?
This is what you said that this is how we budgeted it this year?
It is, and this
More or
is, yes, it is, because this is more money than the old formula would.
But this is what it takes to operate. I mean, it's,
Yes, the operations of the departments have grown, as have the operations of the city.
okay.
Over time. We jointly worked on this ordinance, so certainly I believe we're all in. I believe the chiefs are supportive. I believe the chief financial officer, and I believe the city attorney is. So if you have some input or some thoughts, this may be something you see sometime soon that we bring back to codify.
Okay.
If you all eventually down the road do approve this and it doesn't seem to be working, we'll definitely come back.
You will let us know if you don't have enough money. Sure.
Certainly will.
Add another one to it. Item 4, present and discuss the final joint land use study reports. Chris?
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Approximately, a little over 18 months ago, we hired Matrix Design to help us with our joint land use study with Vance Air Force Base. We've worked on it diligently, and this evening, Celeste Warner is here to present the findings of our efforts over the last 18 months. Celeste, please. Thank you.
Celeste, you don't have to stand in the corner.
I don't have to stand in the corner. Well, Honorable Mayor and Commissioners and the county commissioners and our good partner, Vance Air Force Base, on behalf of Matrix Design Group, I, Celeste Werner, as a project manager, and myself as well as Mike Rapala, who is the deputy project manager, are very, very excited to present the final Vance Joint Land Use Study this evening to all of you. And what an extremely important endeavor this was for your community to go forward and to conduct. It's definitely not a traditional planning effort, and so that makes it even more exciting and more special. With that said, I'm going to move forward. I'm going to try to see if it does work. How about that? And then I'm going to do a little test here. So is that working? No. Not on that screen. Not on that screen. Okay. So I'm going to revert back to yours. So on the note here, this project, a joint land use study, is, even though it's a study and the words land use are in there, it's much more than just a land use study. It really builds upon all of the great partnerships and relationships that you and all of the stakeholders have built over the years with Vance Air Force Base. In the focus of continuing to protect the military mission out at Vance and any future missions that may come in the future. So with that as the main ultimate goal, there's a word that we like to use, and that's balance. So we have to make sure that as we did develop the joint land use study, and as you move forward to make sure that this study, it continues. It's a dynamic study. It is not one that stays stagnant. It's extremely fluid, and it moves with the emerging issues of the world economics, technology, R&D, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the bottom line is, as you go forward, and the overall goal of this project in protecting military readiness at Vance and growing and being a receiver for more missions because it's such an important economic catalyst for your community. In the past, it's brought in over $280 million as far as economic impact, both direct, induced, and indirect. And it continues to grow. So a lot of communities spend a lot of money to get an economic development catalyst like this in their community. You have one, so it's about how much insurance you want to take out to protect it and to grow it, and as well as to make sure you balance and look out for the interest of everybody, the interest of the city and the counties to maintain their quality of life and opportunities for diversifying economic development within your communities, as well as your ultimate goal. And as elected officials, one of the most important responsibilities that each of you hold is to make sure when you're making informed decisions, that you're making decisions that look out for the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare. And that's in everything that you talk about and you decide and you look at for the best interest of all your residents and your visitors as well. The joint land use study, as I stated, is not a traditional planning study. The focus is truly a collaborative process, and it's bringing all of those different stakeholders and future stakeholders to the table and maintaining that collaboration, and really it focuses on communication. And I'll explain what that word communication and how important it is. And the ultimate goal of the joint land use study is to develop this body of information that has existed, and you just need to make it into awareness for the public and all of you, so you can make informed decisions. And for the leaders, the future leaders of the city and the counties can make informed decisions. A number of the items that are part of the body of information, that technical background information, you currently have, but there is a lot of new information that you did not have at your fingertips that you now do have, so you can continue to focus on protecting that economic catalyst, Vance Air Force Base. But what the joint land use study is not, it is not a regulatory document. Very important to highlight that, because a lot of people think that, oh my gosh, if we here as elected officials are going to adopt or accept this study, that are what does that mean as far as financial resources, technological resources? How do we go forward on the codification side of it? There are a number of items or strategies that are part of the second component of the joint land use study, and that is that set of recommendations that is part of the implementation plan. There are going to be some of those strategies and actions that are regulatory in nature that will, at that point in time when you go into implementation and you're implementing those strategies, will have their own public process that you'll need to go through and make sure that the public has another opportunity to have input, and as well you have another opportunity to form it and tailor it to your community. The one item I do want to highlight is those set of recommendations are tailored. Even though they may be one issue that needs to be addressed by a number of different jurisdictions or stakeholders, each of the different actions may address that, they may mitigate that issue, but it is tailored to the specific jurisdiction. So that was another important component that we wanted to highlight. So I just talked about what the project is and what the end state is as far as that body of information and the implementation plan, what your takeaways is. What you cannot see, that's not tangible, is all of the great relationships and new relationships that were built, so you'll be able to continue to focus on maintaining compatible growth, smart planning to protect not only Vance Air Force Base, but also the other two airfields that are really critical to the mission at Vance Air Force Base, and that's Woodring Regional Airport as well as the Kagelman Auxiliary Field. Those are very, very, very important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how important woodering may even be in the future. So with that said, we talk about what our study area is. So we have our 3 key airfields, and ultimately the study area is about 7 miles in radius outside of each one of those airfields. And I'll go into a little bit more detail. The key stakeholders, you'll see a list of them there. In addition to yourself, the city of Enid, we have the town of North Enid, and then the city of Wacomas and the different counties, just to include Alfalfa, Garfield, and Grant County as well. All of them were instrumental in being partners in developing this joint land use study. So those are the key partners, but our other partner in association with this, of course, is Vance Air Force Base, and they were at the table providing technical input throughout as well. So the question is, who guided the development of the implementation plan? So it wasn't just Matrix Design Group. We are here as subject matter experts. We bring to the table best management practices from doing 50-plus joint land use studies across the United States. And with that, we also bring a lot of lessons learned, so you don't have to stumble where other defense communities have. So in assistance, we basically guide the process. It's not our plan, it's your plan. And the different entities that were providing input into the development of the joint land use study were 2 key committees. One was the advisory committee, and the other was the technical committee. I'm going to start with the technical committee, which was comprised of all of the top technical subject matter experts from the different jurisdictions and other stakeholders within the region. They provided an immense amount of information. They did a lot of heavy lifting, and on behalf of Matrix, we want to say thank you to all of them. It was really important. They made sure that all of the information was accurate and that what we were providing was we were developing and providing to then the advisory committee, which had representatives at the elected and appointed official level from each of the different jurisdictions and stakeholders as well. They provided the information and their recommendation, and then the advisory committee gave all of us the blessing that we're going in the right direction to deliver what we have to present to you tonight, the final joint land use study. So ultimately, even though I said it's collaborative in nature, it's not tangible, all of the great relationships and the partnerships that were built, there are going to be some tangible products, and you have a number of them in front of you. There's going to be 3 key tangible products. One is going to be that body of information that's within the technical background report. You have a copy of that. It's the larger one. It looks like this. And then the second report is the joint land use study itself. Basically, the JLUIS report, the first 5 chapters is just a summary of highlights of the technical background, and the meat of it is the set of recommendations that are within the implementation plan. And then ultimately, we have a pretty short but very concise and informative, glossy fact sheet. You have that as well. Looks like this. It's downloadable from the website and other websites, and it's something the public as well as you can have with you when you're making informed decisions at meetings similar to this in the future. What we did start with is, I said it wasn't just land use, right? So we look at airspace as well. We look at 25 different compatibility factors. Those factors range from air quality to transportation congestion to housing, water quality and quantity. And there are so many different emerging issues today that not only are relevant to protecting Vance Air Force Base, but also protecting all of you and your residents, constituents, and the communities within the region. And that is, and I'm going to give you an example. Today, what we didn't think about 10, 15 years ago is the emerging issue of protecting us from drone armies of coming in and polluting our reservoirs, taking down our substations. And how do we address that? How do we work together as partners to make sure that we're not only protecting Vance Air Force Base so they're ready to protect us in regards to national security and continue to train on that side of the house, but how do we also do that for our community? So that is embedded and weaved in here as well. So I just want to highlight some of those. Overall, when we evaluated each one of those 25 compatibility factors, we identified 64, different issues. What we would call compatibility issues, the bottom line, they're encroachment issues. And so I want to highlight that this study isn't a study where it's a heavy push and build on the city and the counties, that the burden is all on us to make sure we protect Vance Air Force Base. It is both, and Vance has a set of recommendations as well. But ultimately, what we're looking at is when we say what are those issues, it's not just the issues where the community is impacting the mission. We're looking at where the military mission may be impacting the community. So we're looking at that mix, right? So to address those 64 issues, I'm not doing that, am I? That on the monitors? Okay, thanks. To address those 64 different issues, we have identified 100 different strategies. And the strategies are a mix. They're a mix of, you'll see there a list of bullet points. There is a rectangle, a shaded rectangle, around 5 of them. And we highlight those because we want to make sure that you know that when we were developing these actions and these recommendations, we did our very best to not overregulate. And it gets back to that balance. How much insurance do you want to take out to protect your economic catalyst? But the balance of making sure we're balancing property rights along with economic development and protecting the mission. So the majority of it is focused on formalizing some of those relationships. Many of us may not be here in 10, 20, 50 years from now, and we want to institutionalize that. The importance of what we know as far as who we have to talk to, what kind of information we need to share, and when do we need to coordinate. And so you'll see a number of the strategies and actions are truly based on the communication side of the house, what I wanted to highlight before, as well as educating our residents, especially in the communities in the county where zoning does not exist. So let's focus on educating them on what is compatible, what is not compatible when you're going forward in developing on your property. Why is that important as a property owner, and you as well and others? I don't want to go and build a senior center or a senior housing facility on a piece of property out by Kegelman, not knowing that it's in a safety zone where there's a high risk of an accident mishap, an engine falling off of an aircraft, or worse, where aircraft would have a full-on accident. So that's the key component that we want to highlight. So most importantly, what are those actions? What are those set of recommendations within that implementation plan? And so what we have here is a number of slides. There's no way you would be bored, and I would not do that to you, I promise, to go through all 100 of them. So you'll see here, we did our best to try to highlight some of the key actions by some of the different jurisdictions. So first off, there are a number of action items and recommendations that all of the jurisdictions would be responsible for working together and implementing, and you'll see some of them here. The key is one of the biggest emerging, or not emerging issues, but issues today within the region, and you're well aware of this, and so is the state, is the wind energy development and the impact on the flying mission out at Vance, not only around Vance Air Force Base and the other airfields, but also within their training areas and what's called those highways in the sky, military training routes. They have basically 3D, a floor and a ceiling. We do not need vertical obstructions where public health, safety, and welfare, again, is a risk to not only the pilots, but also the residents on the ground. So taking into consideration, there's FAA drone regulations that are provided by FAA, but FAA does not have any teeth. They cannot regulate. They look to all of you, to the jurisdictions, to be able to regulate. So we're looking at bringing that down to the communities that are willing and have a existing zoning ordinance, and some of the counties where they may even think about going forward with limited zoning, but at least awareness of what does that mean and what is the impact. So there's the FAA drone regulation and awareness side of the house. There's the MOUs and MOAs, like I stated, to formalize all the different partnerships. There's an item on the right bottom. It's called a web-based interactive tool, and it is amazing. So you could actually put a dot on any piece of property, and it could tell you, even under a military training route, if it's going to have a vertical obstruction. That is critical that you, for the property owners to know before they even come forward with the development application, as well as when your technical staff, planners, and engineers are evaluating, and you as the final decision, as the elected officials, determining that. The other item that is a strategy for all of the jurisdictions are what we call a military compatibility overlay district. So the word overlay district in jurisdictions that have a zoning ordinance would be regulatory in nature. And then in the counties, it would be more of an awareness. So a compatibility manual would be associated with that overlay district for each of them. The key is to guide compatible land use and development and not say no to development. So we want to make sure that that is highlighted here as well. And in this map here, there's a number for each one of the different or airfields. We are just showing one specific one just as an example. So for instance, you'll have the outer, so you can hear me, the outer overlay district is this dashed line here, but then there's a number of subzones or sub-areas of the military compatibility area that include vertical obstruction, the drones, what's called BASH, which is bird, airstrike, wildlife hazard areas. We have the noise contours, and there's a number of others. So you'll have the larger area and then the sub-areas. Why is that important? Because some of those strategies, those 100 strategies, where appropriate, we identify, even if it's regulatory or not regulatory, what specific geographic area it is relevant to and what it addresses.
So Les, what is the distance of that radius?
Thank you for asking, Mayor. Mayor, that overall limit or outer overlay district is 7 nautical miles in the radius area. And then you'll see here at the end of the major runways, you'll have a little, basically, thumb that goes out. That's the extension of the approach and departure slope, glide slope. So we thought that was important to include as well. So that looks big in nature, but the bottom line is the key critical subzones of the military overlay districts, that what we call military compatibility areas, are closer into the runways. Those are where a key component of it is. That larger 7 nautical mile area, that basically states that it's a vertical obstruction one, anything above 500 feet. So I don't want you to get scared and worried that, oh my gosh, we have to administer this big, huge area. Again, a lot of this is awareness as well. Any other questions right yet? Feel free to interrupt. I'll be happy to answer any other additional questions. So with that said, let me go back there. Is this where we were? Yes, this was the this is the Kegelman, overlay district. And then we're looking closer to Woodring. So I said earlier in my presentation that Woodring could be a very, very important asset to the future of Vance Air Force Base. So one of Vance's master plans is to add a new runway. The cost of a new runway is astronomical, as we all know. DoD budgets continually to shrink. So how do we leverage partnerships and provide the opportunity, not only for runway, but apron space as well, to bring a receiver and more mission here, an additional flying mission here at Vance, and that is to utilize Woodring Regional Airport. And we had a lot of discussions with general manager out there, and the runway can handle that. There's additional vacant land that could be utilized for apron space. And in addition to that, that helps your regional airport because FAA provides continual grant funding, and it's based on the dollars or based on the number of operations per year. And so if you have more operations that are being executed at Woodring, you have the opportunity for additional grants. So there's a lot of nexus across the board for win-win-wins in situations like that. So something to think about as you move forward. So why did I bring up Woodring in regards to that? That is because currently you are looking at safety zones at the end of the runway that are FAA safety zones. They're very, very small, much smaller for commercial and regional jets, and they're called runway protection zones. So what we have done in this study is we have provided you what that invisible footprint, which is the military compatibility area for those safety zones that are in concert with the regulations, the Air Force regulations for their flying mission. And that's what they look at in regards to seeing if their bases are encroached and if they are going to sadly decrease their mission with BRAC or without BRAC, because it happens every day. And it's invisible to all of us, but it is. They're racking and stacking and deciding how best to utilize their assets and where to put their weapon systems. The aircrafts are weapon systems in most cases. So we are recommending that as you move forward, you take those safety zones and mirror those over, the ones that are advanced, over your regional airport. So if you do decide in the future to make that a runway that Vance could use. Yes, Mayor.
Have you factored in the increase from 330 pilots trained a year to 420? Are those in your numbers?
We did not put the quantification in.
When you started, those numbers weren't in existence, but they're in existence today.
Today, yes. Yes, sir. No, we don't have them, but it's great news. It's all
Great
very
news.
great.
That's 25% increase in what's going to happen. Kagelman, Woodring, and Vance Air Force Base.
Exactly. I think there's actually, when we did our analysis, room for more growth as well. Does that make sense?
Say that again.
In addition to what's on the books today, if we use the runway at Woodring and additional apron space and or a new runway at Vance, there's a lot more opportunity for mission growth, which would mean growth for Enid, the region, the counties, and housing, revenue, quality of life. They all intermix.
Growth is already underway.
Yes, that's current.
Don't overlook it because it's extremely important.
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting that. So drones, you heard me talk about the emerging issues. That was just one example of the number of emerging issues. Another one that I don't want to ever have you lose sight of, that's resiliency. And resiliency for Vance Air Force Base, making sure they have redundant infrastructure, redundant services that they're going to need to maintain operations, even if there's something happens to one of their other infrastructures and such. So there are key strategies in here as well. So drones and drone operations. Daily, we continue to hear from FAA as well as DoD that there's more and more drone activities, commercial, that are interacting in the same airspace and becoming a much higher risk profile in regards to public health, safety, and welfare of both the pilots and the citizens. So the FAA have these drone regulations or recommendations. You'll see them here. So each one of those tiles, those colored tiles, for instance, these red tiles basically state that drones are not to be flown. Recreational drones and or commercial drones are not to be flown in those areas from the ground up. So again, very important for awareness to the public. And then there's also a 5-mile round red boundary there. That's a notification area to make sure they're notifying the commercial and recreational users are notifying the tower and make sure that they know that there's a drone out there, and the tower can tell you, hey, stay left of this certain landmark or road. This is another area. Oh, wait, am I going in the wrong direction? Okay, sorry. So you heard me talk about wind energy development as being a major issue. Your state is being very proactive. It's actually the #1 state in the United States leading the way in solution sets for addressing wind energy that impacts flying missions. It's something that's hitting a number of the states all over with the DoD installations. So you'll see that we have different radiuses here. It's not just the radar that's out at the airport, but it's also the weather radar, the NOAA weather radar, and you'll see that up at the Kagelman auxiliary field, and those have different circumferences there. One basically is a notification, another one is a mitigation area, one's a consultation area, and the red one is a no-fly zone. Again, an opportunity to incorporate where possible into your zoning ordinances and other ordinances, as well as awareness into some of the counties. Vertical obstruction, we call this awareness, but it's also recommended for regulatory as well. So there's more than just one type of vertical obstruction. There's the FAA Part 77, and then there's what's called imaginary surfaces. And this is where the web-based vertical obstruction interactive tool comes into play. And this is just another version that's at Woodring. So you'll see a number of these that are over each of the different airfields. Noise is very important, as we all know, and that is very, very subjective, right? We have a line. The line could go down a street. I live on one side. You live on the other side. It's not going to be any quieter on the other side of that street. So take that into consideration when you're going forward and you're evaluating where schools should be sited, where hospitals should be sited, even if there's a lot of dense multifamily as well, and the intensity and density of both commercial as well as residential. So you'll see that that is imposed in each one of the different areas. And then ultimately, we have the safety zones that you're well aware of. And I just talked to you about not only out at Vance, that also it's important to make sure it's out at Woodring. Those highways in the sky for our pilots, they're called military training routes. Critical. Without those, there's no reason to even have Vance Air Force Base to get to and do their training, get to some of the ranges. So you'll see some of those military training routes. In short, you'll hear them be stated MTRs. Basically, they are not in your immediate backyard, but you have to be aware of them. And so the state is going forward, I believe, with a strategy to do a statewide web-based information in regards to what is that floor, where is a vertical obstruction, and where it's not, and where you can build and where you shouldn't build. So that is going to be led, I believe, by the state aeronautical and also in coordination with the military, the State Military Task Force Commission. So, trying to go really fast so you're not bored. I'm trying to read your faces. So I'm going to stop here and say I'm going to quickly highlight, I said it was tailored, right? The strategies for addressing some of those mitigation and encroachment issues. I'm going to highlight some of those for the different jurisdictions. Of those 102 strategies, the city of Enid does have a pretty large number of them. There's approximately about 50 different strategies. You'll see them highlighted here. There's areas you've done great in already having an airport environs overlay district in your code. In our documents, there is a number of different strategies and areas where you can continue to improve that. So to amend that and improve it, bring it up to date with some of the new regulations. In your airport environs today, you have a list of what is compatible, the uses that are compatible and not compatible, in some of those safety zones and some of those noise areas. So the Air Force has gone forward and they have updated that table, so it's an opportunity to integrate that. There's opportunities or strategies you'll see here that are pretty easy. Put up signs to reduce speed on some of the roadways so it doesn't create dust, which is then a higher risk profile or risk issue for pilots when they're taking off at the end of the runways. So you'll see signage, surveillance, anti-terrorism, force protection, a number of those that you'll see here. Coordinate with stormwater. I want to bring that one up and highlight that one. You'll see that at the top there because it focuses on resiliency. Something that you've worked with in partnership in the past on water, so there's other items in addition to that. Yes, sir, Commissioner.
Has there been any reported incidents with drones?
I am going to look to my right. I have a volunteer.
Commissioner, there was one about a year ago. There was a reported drone. It was investigated by us and also security forces, and I'm not aware of any successful finding of who was flying the drone or if the drone was actually there.
The other day I was laughing. I was watching TV, and I noticed that a lot of your businesses, especially your insurance companies, instead of sending someone out to take a look at a problem on your property, to assess problems on your property, they said they're going to start using drones in the future. So I think that's very important that.
Well, we have a lot of folks who are,
conversation
I mean,
we're
there
having.
are a lot of companies who locally and in the region use drones for ag purposes. I mean, there's a lot of that use that certainly we don't want to discourage. We want, I mean, that's my concern with some of this as we go through these lists, especially, and I know the wind stuff is kind of above our pay grade, but, a lot of these recommendations, the balancing between the interest of the property owners, the interest of the other communities. We want people building wind farms in our neck of the woods. It's really good for property owners. It's a really nice mailbox check, and the alternative resource and all that. We want that around here, but the balancing with some of the recommendations seems very. I mean, it's a joint land use study for our community and the Air Force Base, but on some of these recommendations, that does give me some pause. But I guess they're just recommendations, and the implementation, this long list with the blue columns of where Enid has the little filled-in box. I mean, it's up to us at that point to actually do anything with it.
Yes, Commissioner, correct. I'd like to add on to that just to give you an example. So what we have brought forward, again, is that body of information that exists at the FAA, if their guidelines for regulations. But we've developed a number of different zoning ordinances across defense communities. Every single one of them are different. And it goes back to what is that balance, right? And it's going to get more and more. There are a number of realtors that use it, engineers use it to go do surveying anymore. Weddings, they're doing photography, aerial photography with drones at weddings, outdoor weddings, I should say, put it that way. So yes, and then the other item is there's discussions at very high levels at the federal level with Amazon and a number of other companies that are going to start using drones for delivering. So we have to make sure that you have that information. And earlier I stated, it's not regulatory in nature. When you go to implement, you have that other. Yeah. That's where you'll be able to really finesse it and identify what is going to be best for your community. But at a minimum, you have what is the regulations that are being recommended, and you get to decide on that, most importantly. So
you have to fill out some type of permit to purchase a drone, or can just anyone off the street go get one?
Anyone can go and purchase one. it is their responsibility, and we believe what we've found that a number of citizens have no idea, that especially if they're going to, even businesses do not know that they need to, if it's a commercial use, they need to get it permitted. Yes.
Changing the subject just for a moment.
Yes, sir.
This map that you've got here on the noise attenuation, it looks slightly larger than what I recall from our previous studies on this subject. Did we change the boundaries of the noise areas over what we had shown in the past?
You know, I am glad you brought that up. There was a lot of discussion on this, on the noise contours. I'm pretty sure, I think our final conclusion was, and I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, was to stick with the noise contours that we currently have.
That is correct.
Yep.
Sir, it's the ones from 2008.
The T6 is taking care of a lot of that.
They're actually better now because that's based on T-37 data, which is obviously a much noisier aircraft. So you're actually better. The most question I most likely get, Commissioner, is why is it oblonged? Why is it so much to the south versus to the north? It's because 75% of the time we fly to the south. And so it's not just the instantaneous noise, it's the noise over time. So since most of our winds come from the south, that's why the contours spin most of the time to the south. However, in the wintertime, when you hear airplanes over Willow West, it's because the winds change, we're taking off to the north. So it's both the combination of the actual the intensity of the noise and over time is how that charts.
Well, the reason I asked that is that actually this was a personal question because I live in the meadows, which is underneath this diagram here, and I was told in the past that there was a pretty precise area that was affected by the noise, and it was not a very large area, not anything the size of what they're reflecting on this map here.
If they're going to land, they have to be in a pretty precise area.
Ideally,
I know that,
yes.
but I mean, that doesn't affect the noise or the pathway that they used to, to make their approach.
T6 has taken care of a lot of that, no.
What I'm referring to is if you live in the meadows, you're going to hear those planes either landing or taking off depending on the wind direction. And sometimes they're fairly loud.
So, so much, and I love doing this, such a passion for helping defense communities. Commissioner, now that you brought that up, I like to highlight a component or a phrase that's in your airport environs zoning. I believe it states in there, as an ACUS is updated to update your airport environs. And I would recommend, Matrix would recommend, that be taken out when you update. And the reason why is there is going to be, when funding is available, I believe, an update, a new ACUS that's going to be conducted. And there's a possibility that those noise contours can shrink. And what we tell defense communities, and especially with noise, because it's so subjective, that a lot of defense communities have gone forward and taken that larger footprint because as new weapon systems are being developed, the chances of them, especially if it's a fighter jet, that is going to be much louder. And so we want to make sure that you are proactive in guiding the appropriate type of uses and or sound attenuation with your building codes in order to be forward thinking. Again, that's when you get into the implementation side of it, you'll have the opportunity to, determine what's going to be best for your area. But I just wanted to share with what some other communities are doing. You do not have to do that, but that's an example.
I think we've done a good job of keeping up with that in the zoning area. People can call us and find out what to do. Call the city of Enid.
Yes, as an example, so you're definitely a leading edge right there with the state. You should be very proud on that note.
How does ACUS fall into this scenario?
Well, that is a DOD-driven project, and the ACUs, it focuses only on two major components, safety at the end of the runways and noise. A joint land use study looks at all of the 25 different compatibilities, inclusive of the noise and the safety. So it just continues. And as well, I just stated the Air Force updated the regulations on what type of uses. We always keep getting smarter, right? So they're definitely amending and updating those uses as well, on what's compatible and not compatible in each of those different areas. Again, that is your decision as an elected body to determine if you want to stay with the old table, go with the new table, amend it a little bit. Remember that you always have the opportunity to grandfather everybody who's currently there, existing structures. So that's critical. Any other questions?
Yes, I do. How does the city of Enid get information from the federal government when changes are made? Do we have to look out for it, or does the city of Enid?
They give that to us, Mayor. It comes in a form of the official ACUS study, and that in the past has been given to us. I've been here under several of those, and then we codify that for you, the commission, to adopt the ordinance that mirrors the ACUS.
To me, we keep up with it very well.
Yes. And Matrix body of work includes our current ACUS that's on Vance Air Force Base.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, Mayor.
Can you get 4 sets of books like we have? We have 4 new city councilmen coming on in 2 months.
We have extras, Mayor, so we will
Yeah, that's
we'll
right.
take care of them.
I'll take care of that.
Answer is yes, sir. Great questions. Moving on to Alfalfa County. So you'll see here, as we go into the counties, their strategies focus much more on awareness and education and getting all of the information into their residents as they go forward to determine what they would like to do on their property. One of the items that we would highly recommend is to go forward and develop a military community compatibility handbook that tells you what you should and shouldn't, or not what you should or shouldn't, what is recommended and what is compatible in each of the different jurisdictions or geographic areas per those military compatibility areas. So instead of having an ordinance for the counties, they'll have a handbook that they could refer to provide them guidance on what is compatible and what isn't. And then they get to decide in regards to what's best for them. So at least they have that body of information. You'll see here, and that's that area, the guidelines on your left. Let's see. The other one I want to highlight is the Integrated Flood Management Plan. No one jurisdiction can address flood without doing it at a regional level. So because whatever one neighbor, let it be a home, a single-family home, or an entire jurisdiction, they will always have an impact on their neighbor with flood. So making sure that that is integrated and with all the other stakeholders that are, or landowners, property owners that are adjacent to them. In regards to Grant County, very similar to what I just talked about with Alfalfa County, I'm just going to highlight the alternative energy coordination. So earlier, I didn't highlight one of them for all jurisdictions is whenever anyone hears about a potential new wind energy development, it is critical that you inform the Department of Defense Alternative Energy Siting Clearinghouse. And if that is not relevant as far as people know what that phone number is, that's what this implementation JLUS committee that we have as far as one of the strategies, but also I would say the City of Enid has really been there as a technical resource for all of the regional stakeholders in the jurisdictions, and to continue to do that is really important, especially out in the county areas where we have to protect the land underneath those military training areas from vertical obstruction and the wind turbines that have an impact on frequency on both those two different radars that we highlighted earlier. Garfield County, very similar as well. We really would like to see some zoning ordinance if possible, if amending the noise one, and also school master planning. I want to highlight that one. So school master planning is one that's actually weaved throughout all of the jurisdictions, but they don't have to go through a commission to get approved for their future siting of schools. So we have to make sure that we get this information out to all of the school districts, so when they're doing their future planning and they're purchasing lands, or if they're evaluating if they're going to increase in certain areas, the population and the type, that they have enough information at hand, that body of information, to make informed decisions. Ultimately, I talked about the 3 different documents that you have in front of you. And on the left-hand side, those are the different chapters. You'll see in the background report a lot of detail summarized in the JLUS report, as I stated earlier. And what our next steps are. So we're here this evening as a study session, and ultimately when it goes into the public hearing for you to consider the acceptance and or adoption of the joint land use study. The bottom line is that the most important component isn't what you have in front of you today. The most important component is implementation, and to have a seamless mode of partnerships and communication coordination that has evolved with the joint land use study to go right into that implementation. There is opportunities for funding a portion or some of those strategies, and that needs to be coordinated with the OEA, Office of Economic Adjustment, which is the entity that funded this grant with, usually they have a 10% match. It can be in kind as well. That is an arm of the Department of Defense. Their main mission is to help the communities, defense communities, and doing just this. This is the most important picture and slide that we have in front of you this evening. And that is to say thank you to everybody who has been involved. There was a lot of work that went into this. Everybody worked together, and all of the different members of both the advisory and technical committees. And we want to say thank you to each and every one of them, as well as all of you. A big round of applause goes out to them. And they, on January 10th of this year, they came together as a joint entity, joint group, and they all unanimously accepted the joint land use study to be recommended to all of you, the elected officials in each one of the jurisdictions, for your consideration. And with that, I'd like to say thank you again on behalf of not only Matrix Design Group, myself, and everybody who was involved. So, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 5, we are adjourned. We'll meet as a city council at 6:30.
Thank you for watching the Enid City Commission study session. All meetings are broadcast on local cable channel 12 and in high definition on channel 112. In addition, the study session is live streamed on the web at enidtv.org. If you have any questions or comments regarding this broadcast, please visit the City of Enid website at enid.org.